The crayon snapped in half. 5-year-old Lily Martinez didn't mean to break it. Her small fingers had just been pressing too hard, trying to make the purple dark enough to show the bruises. She stared down at her drawing. A stick-figure woman with purple marks on her arms, another taller figure looming nearby with angry scribbles around his head. "That's a very interesting picture, Lily," came a gentle voice from behind her. Lily's shoulders tensed. She'd learned to recognize adult voices, learned to sort them into categories. Angry voices, tired voices, voices that pretended to care but really just wanted you to be quiet. This voice was different. It was warm but careful, like someone trying not to scare a small animal. She turned to find her new kindergarten teacher crouched beside her desk. Mr. Dante had only started at Brightside Elementary 3 weeks ago, replacing Mrs. Peterson who'd retired. The other kids whispered that he looked like a movie star, tall with dark hair that was always perfectly styled, wearing suits that seemed too fancy for someone who spent his days with finger paints and alphabet songs. Lily thought he looked sad, even when he smiled. "Can you tell me about your drawing?" Mr. Dante asked, his dark eyes focused entirely on her face, not the picture. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Lily's throat felt tight. She'd drawn pictures like this before. Her old teacher had looked at them, made concerned faces, asked questions that Lily didn't know how to answer. Then nothing changed. Mommy still came home late with new bruises. The angry man still showed up at their apartment, his voice loud enough to shake the walls. "It's just pretend," Lily whispered, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. Mr. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the classroom buzzed with the controlled chaos of 20 other 5-year-olds during free draw time. Crayons scratched across paper. Someone giggled. Another child asked for the green marker. "Lily," Mr. Dante said softly, "sometimes pretend pictures show us real feelings. If you ever want to talk about real feelings, I'm here to listen." Something in his voice made Lily's eyes burn with tears. She'd learned never to cry at school. Crying meant questions. Questions meant calls to Mommy. Calls to Mommy meant the angry man getting angrier. She just nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Mr. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Would you like to draw something else? Maybe something that makes you happy?" Lily thought about it, then reached for a yellow crayon. She started drawing a sun, bright and warm, the kind that existed in books but never seemed to shine on her real life. As Mr. Dante stood and moved to help another student, Lily watched him from the corner of her eye. There was something different about the way he moved, controlled, precise, like every gesture was calculated. The other teachers were soft and loose, all hugs and bright voices. Mr. Dante was solid, contained, as if he was constantly aware of exactly how much space he occupied. She didn't know that Alessandro Dante wasn't really a kindergarten teacher. She didn't know that the man currently helping Jaden Martinez with his letter controlled half the organized crime in the city. She didn't know that he'd taken this teaching position as part of an elaborate cover, a legitimate front that allowed him to move freely through neighborhoods his organization protected. She didn't know that the moment he'd seen her drawing, something had shifted in his carefully constructed world. All she knew was that when Mr. Dante looked at her purple bruises rendered in broken crayon, his eyes had turned cold in a way that made her feel, for the first time in months, like maybe someone actually saw what was happening. Alessandro Dante had killed his first man at 17. It wasn't something he thought about often anymore, that initial crossing of a line that could never be uncrossed. 20 years later, violence was simply part of the infrastructure of his life, as routine as morning coffee or checking profit margins from his various businesses. But standing in front of 20 kindergartners at 3 o'clock dismissal, watching parents and guardians filter into the classroom to collect their children, Alessandro found himself thinking about that first kill. About the moment everything changed. About the weight of choices that echo through decades. "Mr. Dante, my daddy's here." Sophia Chin bounced on her toes, pointing toward a tired-looking man in construction gear. "Have a wonderful evening, Sophia. Don't forget to practice your letter sounds." Alessandro's smile was practiced, professional, revealing nothing of the calculations running beneath the surface. He'd been doing this for 3 months now. The principal thought he was a career changer, a former business consultant who discovered his passion for education. The other teachers thought he was dedicated, perhaps a bit formal, but genuinely invested in the children. No one suspected that he spent his evenings overseeing operations that generated millions in revenue through methods that would never appear in any legitimate accounting book. The classroom gradually emptied. Joshua left with his grandmother. Emma skipped out holding her mother's hand. The twins departed with their au pair. But Lily Martinez remained at her desk, small hands folded, eyes fixed on the clock like she was counting down to something inevitable. Alessandro had noticed patterns over the past 3 weeks. Lily was always the last to be picked up. Her mother, Rosa Martinez, consistently arrived 15 to 20 minutes after dismissal ended, apologizing profusely, explaining about traffic or unexpected overtime at the restaurant where she worked as a waitress. Today, Rosa was already 25 minutes late. Alessandro began cleaning up the classroom, organizing construction paper, wiping down tables, keeping Lily in his peripheral vision. The little girl hadn't moved, hadn't even picked up a book to pass the time. She just sat there, small and still, like someone who'd learned that making herself invisible was a survival strategy. His phone buzzed. A message from Marco, his second-in-command. Territory dispute on the south side. Rodriguez family pushing boundaries. Need guidance. Alessandro typed back with one hand while straightening a crooked alphabet poster with the other. Handle it diplomatically first. Report back in 1 hour. Mr. Dante? Lily's voice was barely audible. He turned, giving her his full attention. Yes, Lily. Do you think my mommy forgot about me? The question hit harder than it should have. Alessandro had built emotional walls that could withstand almost anything: betrayal, violence, loss. But this small child, asking if her mother had forgotten her existence, found a crack he didn't know existed. I'm certain your mother didn't forget you, Alessandro said, moving to crouch beside her desk, so they were eye level. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated days that make them late. Lily nodded, but her expression suggested she'd heard explanations like this before and stopped believing them. Can I tell you a secret? She whispered, glancing toward the classroom door as if checking for eavesdroppers. Alessandro's instinct sharpened. In his world, secrets were currency, leverage, sometimes the difference between life and death. But from a 5-year-old, this was different territory entirely. You can tell me anything, Lily. It's safe here. She leaned closer, her small voice dropping even lower. Mommy's late because the angry man makes her scared. When she's scared, she moves slower. Like if she takes longer, maybe he won't be waiting at our house when we get home. Cold fury bloomed in Alessandro's chest, controlled and precise. He'd spent 20 years learning to weaponize anger, to channel it into calculated responses rather than explosive reactions. But this required every ounce of that discipline. The angry man, Alessandro repeated carefully. Is he someone who hurts your mommy? Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned that crying accomplished nothing. He hurts her arms. And her face, sometimes. She tells me it's because she's clumsy, but I'm not stupid, Mr. Dante. I know what hitting looks like. Alessandro's phone buzzed again. Another message from Marco. A reminder about the evening meeting with suppliers from the East Coast. A question about payment schedules. He silenced the phone completely. Lily, does this angry man have a name? She shook her head quickly. Mommy tells me to go to my room when he comes. But our apartment is small, and the walls are thin. I hear everything. Before Alessandro could respond, the classroom door burst open. Rosa Martinez rushed in, her dark hair escaping from a messy ponytail, her waitress uniform wrinkled and stained. Her makeup was heavy, but not heavy enough to completely conceal the yellowish-green bruise along her left cheekbone. I'm so sorry, Mr. Dante, Rosa said breathlessly, avoiding eye contact. The bus broke down, and I had to wait for the next one, and then traffic was terrible and— It's quite all right, Mrs. Martinez, Alessandro said smoothly, standing but positioning himself slightly between Rosa and Lily. These things happen. For the first time, Rosa actually looked at him, really looked at him, and something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or wariness. She'd lived in the city long enough to recognize danger when she saw it, and despite the kindergarten teacher facade, Alessandro carried an unmistakable edge. Come on, baby, Rosa said to Lily, her voice softer now. Let's go home. Lily gathered her backpack with slow, deliberate movements. As she passed Alessandro's desk, she looked up at him with eyes far too knowing for a 5-year-old. Thank you for listening, Mr. Dante, she whispered. Alessandro watched mother and daughter leave, noting the way Rosa's hand trembled slightly as she held Lily's smaller one. Noting the way, she glanced over her shoulder twice before they reached the hallway. Noting the careful way she moved, like someone whose body hurt in places that didn't show. The moment they were out of sight, Alessandro pulled out his phone and made a call. Marco, I need you to run a complete background check on someone. Rosa Martinez works as a waitress, probably lives in the Riverside district based on this school's catchment area. I want to know everything: current address, employment history, known associates, and especially any men in her life. Boss, is this related to the Rodriguez situation? No. This is personal. There was a pause. In 5 years of working together, Alessandro had never used that word in relation to anyone outside the organization. How deep should we go? Marco asked carefully. All the way down. And Marco, discretion is essential. No one can know I'm looking into this. Understood. I'll have preliminary information by morning. Alessandro ended the call and stood alone in the empty classroom, surrounded by colorful alphabet posters and children's artwork. His reflection caught in the window, a man in an expensive suit that cost more than most teachers made in a month, pretending to be something he wasn't, getting involved in something that violated every rule he'd lived by for 2 decades. Don't get attached. Don't get personal. Don't let emotions compromise operations. But as he stared at Lily's abandoned drawing still sitting on her desk, the stick figure woman with purple bruises, the looming angry figure, Alessandro realized he'd already broken all 3 rules. Somewhere in this city, a man was putting his hands on Rosa Martinez, terrorizing her, hurting her in front of her daughter, making a 5-year-old child draw pictures of violence instead of sunshine and rainbows. Alessandro Dante had built his empire on understanding leverage and applying force with surgical precision. He'd eliminated rivals, negotiated impossible deals, and commanded respect through a carefully balanced combination of intelligence and ruthlessness. But this required something different, something more precise than any hit he'd ever ordered, something that would protect Lily and Rosa without revealing who he really was or putting them in more danger. He locked the classroom door behind him, already planning his next moves. The angry man in Lily's drawing had no idea that he'd just become a problem for one of the most dangerous men in the city. And Alessandro Dante solved problems permanently. The file landed on Alessandro's desk at 6 the next morning. Marco had been thorough. Rosa Martinez, 28 years old, single mother, worked double shifts at Danny's Diner on 5th Street. High school graduate, no criminal record, no family in the city. Lily's father was listed as unknown on the birth certificate, a deliberate omission that spoke volumes about circumstances Rosa had probably fought hard to escape. But it was the last section of the report that made Alessandro's jaw tighten. Current romantic involvement: Derek Sutton, 34, construction foreman with a history that read like a blueprint for disaster. 2 previous domestic violence charges that had been dropped when the victims refused to testify. A pattern of targeting single mothers with young children. Known associates included men who ran illegal gambling operations and loan sharking rings on the city's west side. Alessandro studied the grainy surveillance photo Marco had included. Derek Sutton was exactly what he'd expected. Average height, stocky build, the kind of man who used his fists when his limited vocabulary failed him. Nothing remarkable except for the cruelty that seemed to radiate from his expression, even in a still photograph. "We can handle this quietly," Marco said from the doorway of Alessandro's office. "Make it look like an accident. He's a construction worker. Those sites are dangerous. One bad fall, and your problem disappears." Alessandro considered it. The solution was clean, efficient, permanent. Exactly how he'd solved hundreds of problems over the past 20 years. But something stopped him. "No," he said finally, "that's too simple. And it puts Rosa in a difficult position if Sutton suddenly dies while they're involved. Police ask questions. People remember patterns." Marco raised an eyebrow. "So what's the play?" "Information first. I want to understand the full scope of his operation who he owes money to, who owes him. I want to know every pressure point before we apply any force. Boss, with all due respect, this seems like a lot of resources for a kindergarten teacher's student's mother's boyfriend. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped to a register that made Marco straighten instinctively. With all due respect, Marco, I didn't ask for your opinion on resource allocation. Understood. I'll have a complete workup by tomorrow. After Marco left, Alessandro sat alone in his office, watching the city wake up through floor-to-ceiling windows. His legitimate businesses, 3 restaurants, a construction company, a real estate development firm, were already generating their morning reports. Money flowing in, operations running smoothly, the machine he built functioning exactly as designed. But his mind was stuck on an image from yesterday. Lily Martinez sitting at her desk, drawing bruises in purple crayon, her small face carefully blank in the way children learned when showing emotion became dangerous. His phone buzzed, a reminder that he needed to be at Brightside Elementary in 90 minutes for morning arrival. Alessandro Dante, who commanded an organization worth tens of millions, who made decisions that affected hundreds of lives, who inspired fear in men twice his size, stood up and prepared to spend his day teaching 5-year-olds their colors and shapes. The duality should have felt absurd. Instead, it felt necessary in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Rosa Martinez's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she poured coffee for the breakfast rush at Danny's diner. She'd been awake since 4:30, her body aching from where Derek had shoved her against the kitchen counter last night. Not hard enough to leave visible marks. He'd learned to be strategic about that, but hard enough that every movement sent sharp reminders through her ribcage. "You okay, honey?" Denise, the other morning waitress, touched Rosa's shoulder gently. Rosa plastered on her practiced smile. "Just tired. Lily had nightmares." It wasn't entirely a lie. Lily did have nightmares. Nightmares about the angry man, about Mommy getting hurt, about all the things a 5-year-old shouldn't have to dream about but couldn't help absorbing from their too-thin apartment walls. "That sweet baby," Denise said, shaking her head. "She's lucky to have you." Rosa wasn't sure luck had anything to do with it. Some days, survival felt less like fortune and more like sheer stubborn refusal to let the world break them completely. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A text from Derek. "Need to talk tonight. Be home by 6. The words carried weight she'd learned to interpret. "Need to talk" meant he was angry about something. "Be home by 6" meant don't be late or the consequences would escalate. Rosa's chest tightened. She had a shift until 7. Leaving early meant losing hours she desperately needed to save for what? She didn't even know anymore. Escape felt like a fantasy. Every time she managed to save a few $100s, some emergency depleted it. Lily's school supplies. A doctor's visit when the fever wouldn't break. The minimum payment on credit cards she'd accumulated trying to keep them fed and housed. The diner's door chimed, and Rosa automatically called out, "Seat yourself, I'll be right with you." But when she turned, her practiced smile faltered. Mr. Dante stood just inside the doorway, looking completely out of place in his tailored charcoal suit among the diner's worn vinyl booths and faded linoleum. His dark eyes scanned the space with the kind of awareness that made Rosa's survival instincts flare. This man saw everything, noticed everything, the way predators did. "Mr. Dante," Rosa managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is unexpected." "Mrs. Martinez." His smile was polite, professional, revealing nothing. "I hope I'm not intruding. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd grab coffee before school." It was 7:15 in the morning. Brightside Elementary was on the other side of the city. No one was in this neighborhood accidentally. But Rosa had learned when to ask questions and when to simply nod and play along. "Of course. Please, sit anywhere." Alessandro chose a booth near the window, positioning himself with his back to the wall, another detail Rosa noticed and filed away. Derek did the same thing, always needing to see exits, always alert to potential threats. But where Derek's awareness came from paranoia and violence, Mr. Dante seemed almost meditative, like a predator so confident in its abilities that vigilance was simply second nature. Rosa approached with a coffee pot, acutely aware of how her uniform was slightly too tight, slightly too worn, showing every year of hard use. "Coffee, please. Black." She poured carefully, willing her hands not to shake. Can I get you anything else? Breakfast special is eggs, bacon, and toast for $6.95. That sounds perfect. Alessandro's gaze moved from the menu to her face, and Rosa felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with her appearance. Mrs. Martinez, may I ask you something? Every instinct screamed danger. Of course. Lily mentioned yesterday that you work long hours. I'm impressed by your dedication, but I want to make sure she's getting adequate rest. The kindergarten curriculum requires focus, and exhausted children struggle. The words were perfectly reasonable, exactly what a concerned teacher should say. But Rosa heard the subtext underneath. I notice things. I'm paying attention. I see what's happening. Lily's doing fine in school, isn't she? Rosa asked, defensive despite herself. She's exceptionally bright, Alessandro said smoothly. But she also seems anxious, distracted. Children that age should be carefree, and Lily carries herself like someone with adult-sized worries. Rosa's throat tightened. We're managing. It's not easy, being a single parent, but we're managing. I'm sure you are. Alessandro's tone softened almost imperceptibly. I only mention it because there are resources available. The school has counseling services, parent support groups, financial assistance programs. We don't need charity. Rosa cut him off, the words sharper than intended. I provide for my daughter. We're fine. The lie hung between them, transparent and fragile. Alessandro didn't argue. He simply nodded, accepting the boundary she'd drawn while his eyes communicated that he knew exactly what she wasn't saying. Rosa retreated to Place's order, her heart hammering. She'd been so careful. Kept the bruises hidden, maintained the facade, never let anyone at Lily's school see behind the carefully constructed normalcy. But this man, this kindergarten teacher who moved like a soldier and watched like a chess player, he'd seen through everything in less than a month. When she brought his breakfast 15 minutes later, Alessandro spoke without looking up from his phone. Mrs. Martinez, I want you to know that if you or Lily ever need anything at all, my door is always open. Not as a teacher looking for problems to report, but as someone who genuinely wants to help. Rosa set the plate down carefully. Why would you care about helping us? Alessandro finally looked up, and something in his expression made Rosa's breath catch. It wasn't pity. It wasn't the predatory interest she'd learned to recognize and avoid. It was something else entirely, a controlled fury wrapped in professional concern. Because Lily is a remarkable child who deserves to feel safe, he said quietly. And so do you. The simple statement nearly broke Rosa's composure. When was the last time anyone had suggested she deserved safety? That her life mattered beyond her usefulness as a worker, a mother, a target for Derek's frustrations? I should get back to work, Rosa managed, blinking back tears. Of course. Thank you for the excellent service. Rosa moved away, attending to other customers, refilling coffee cups, delivering orders. But she felt Alessandro's presence like a weight in her peripheral vision. He ate slowly, occasionally checking his phone, looking for all the world like an ordinary man having breakfast before work. Except Rosa had survived 28 years by learning to recognize danger in its many forms. And Alessandro Dante was dangerous in ways she didn't fully understand but could sense in her bones. When he left 45 minutes later, he placed a $100 bill on the table for a $12 meal and walked out before Rosa could protest. Denise whistled low when Rosa picked up the money. Damn, honey. That man's either trying to impress you or he's terrible at math. Rosa stared at the crisp bill, her mind racing. The money would help. It always helped. But accepting it felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross, acknowledging a debt she didn't know how to repay. Her phone buzzed again. Derek, don't forget. 6 p.m. We need to talk about your spending. Rosa's fingers closed around the $100, and for the first time in months, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite hope, that was too dangerous, but maybe the faintest whisper that she wasn't as alone as she believed. Alessandro had precisely 2 hours before he needed to be at the school. He spent them in a warehouse on the industrial side of a city, watching as his men unloaded a shipment of luxury vehicles that would be distributed to dealerships across 3 states. Legitimate business on the surface, with layers of complexity underneath that generated substantial, untaxed revenue. Marco approached, tablet in hand. Sudden update. He's gotten himself into debt with some unsavory people. Owes approximately $40,000 to a loan shark named Vincent Corelli. Corelli's getting impatient. Alessandro processed this information. Corelli works independently. Mostly. He's got connections to the Marchetti family, but nothing formal. Small-time operation, big-time interest rates. And Sutton can't pay. Not even close. He's been gambling to try to cover it, which obviously only made things worse. Our sources say Corelli's threatened to involve Sutton's girlfriend if payment isn't received soon. Alessandro's expression hardened. Define involve. The implication was that she might need to work off the debt in ways that don't involve waitressing. Cold fury, precise and controlled, flooded Alessandro's system. I want everything on Corelli. Bank accounts, properties, every debt he holds. And I want to know everyone who owes Sutton money, everyone he's threatened, every mistake he's made in the past 5 years. Marco's eyes widened slightly. Boss, that's going to take significant resources. For a teacher, student's mother's boyfriend's loan shark, this is. Did I ask for your assessment of resource allocation? No, sir. Then get me the information. After Marco left, Alessandro stood alone among the luxury vehicles, expensive machines that represented both legitimate commerce and the intricate web of connections that made his empire function. But his mind wasn't on profit margins or territory disputes. It was on a 5-year-old girl drawing bruises in purple crayon. On a 28-year-old woman who flinched when touched too suddenly. On the way Rosa Martinez had looked at him in the diner, wary, desperate, hoping against hope that someone might actually help without demanding payment she couldn't afford. Alessandro pulled out his phone and made another call. Tommy, I need a favor. You still have connections in family court? Sure, boss. What kind of favor? The kind that helps women escape dangerous situations without putting them in the system's crosshairs. Documentation, legal protection, resources. Tommy was quiet for a moment. This about a woman? A woman and her daughter. You getting personally involved? Alessandro watched sunlight glint off a silver Mercedes, considered the question seriously. Yes. Never thought I'd see the day. You need an introduction, or just information? Information for now. I want to understand every legal option available before I make any moves. I'll have a complete packet by tonight. Boss, be careful. Personal involvement makes you vulnerable. Alessandro ended the call, Tommy's warning echoing in his mind. In his world, vulnerability meant weakness. Weakness meant death. He'd built his entire operation on the principle of emotional distance, of never caring about anything more than he was willing to lose. But as he headed toward his car, preparing to transform from crime boss to kindergarten teacher, Alessandro realized he'd already crossed that line. Lily Martinez, with her 2 serious eyes and her purple crayon bruises, had become something he wasn't willing to lose. Which meant Derek Sutton had become a problem that needed solving. And Alessandro Dante was very, very good at solving problems. Lily was crying when Alessandro arrived at school. Not the loud, dramatic crying of a child having a tantrum. The quiet, hopeless crying of someone who'd learned that making noise only made things worse. She sat alone at the reading corner, her small body curled into itself, tears streaming silently down her face while other children played around her, oblivious to her pain. Alessandro moved immediately, crouching beside her. Lily, what's wrong? She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. I can't find my lunchbox. Mommy's going to be so mad. I'm sure your mother won't be mad about a lost lunchbox, Alessandro said gently. You don't understand. Lily's voice cracked. It was new. She saved money for it. And I'm stupid and lost it. And now the angry man is going to yell at her because she wasted money on stupid me. Alessandro felt something crack in his chest. Lily, listen to me very carefully. You are not stupid. And if anyone makes your mother feel bad about buying you things you need, that person is wrong. But, no buts. You are a smart, kind, wonderful little girl who deserves lunchboxes and happiness and safety. Do you understand? Lily stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. The concept that she might deserve good things seemed genuinely foreign to her 5-year-old understanding of the world. I'll tell you what, Alessandro said. I have an extra lunchbox in my supply closet. You can use it today, and we'll look for yours after school. Deal. You have extra lunch boxes? Teachers are always prepared, Alessandro said with a small smile. Come on, let's get you cleaned up. In the classroom bathroom, Alessandro helped Lily wash her face while his mind calculated angles and consequences. Derek Sutton wasn't just hurting Rosa. He was destroying this child's sense of self-worth, teaching her that she was burdensome, worthless, deserving of anger and punishment. The damage was already extensive. How much worse would it get if Alessandro didn't intervene? But intervention meant exposure, meant revealing himself, meant crossing lines he'd spent 20 years maintaining. Mr. Dante? Lily's small voice interrupted his thoughts. Why are you being so nice to me? Alessandro met her eyes in the bathroom mirror. Because everyone deserves kindness, Lily. Especially children. The angry man says kids should be seen and not heard. That we're expensive and annoying. The angry man is wrong about many things. Lily considered this carefully. Are you going to tell someone? About my drawing and the things I told you? Alessandro paused, weighing his response. Would you like me to tell someone? No. Her answer was immediate and terrified. It'll make things worse. It always makes things worse. The system had failed this child before. Social workers, mandatory reporters, well-meaning adults who'd created more problems than solutions. Lily had learned that asking for help only brought more pain. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Alessandro made a decision. I won't tell anyone you don't want me to tell, but I want you to know that you and your mother are not alone. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Lily didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway, trusting this strange teacher who looked at her like she mattered. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of alphabet songs and story time. Alessandro went through the motions perfectly, the patient teacher, the gentle authority figure, the man invested in early childhood education. But his mind was elsewhere, constructing a plan that would protect Rosa and Lily without revealing who he really was or putting them in more danger. By the time dismissal arrived and Rosa showed up, on time for once, her movements careful and slow, Alessandro had made his decision. He was going to dismantle Derek Sutton's life piece by piece. Not with violence, though God knew he wanted to, but with precision, with leverage, with the same calculated ruthlessness he brought to every business operation. And Rosa Martinez would never know that her daughter's kindergarten teacher was the reason her nightmare was about to end. Derek Sutton's phone rang at 11 p.m. while he was 3 beers deep and watching sports highlights he'd already seen twice. The number was unfamiliar. He almost didn't answer, but something, maybe the late hour, maybe the insistent way it kept ringing, made him pick up. Yeah, Mr. Sutton. The voice on the other end was smooth, professional, utterly devoid of warmth. My name is Michael Rothstein. I represent Vincent Corelli regarding the outstanding debt you currently owe him. Derek's stomach dropped. I told Corelli I'd have his money by the end of the month. That was last month's promise, and the month before that. Mr. Corelli's patience has limits, and you've exceeded them. Derek stood up, pacing his cramped living room. I need more time. I've got some things in the works. Mr. Sutton, I'm not calling to negotiate an extension. I'm calling to inform you that your debt has been purchased by another party. As of 6 p.m. this evening, you no longer owe Vincent Corelli $40,000. Relief flooded through Derek. Wait, seriously? Someone paid it off? Not paid off. Purchased. You now owe $40,000 to a different creditor. One with considerably less patience than Mr. Corelli. The relief evaporated. Who? Who bought my debt? That information is confidential. What you need to understand is that your new creditor expects full payment within 30 days, along with accumulated interest. That brings your total to $47,000. 47, that's insane. I can't. You have 30 days, Mr. Sutton. I suggest you consider all available options for generating that kind of capital. Liquidating assets, for instance. I understand you have a truck, some tools, perhaps other resources that could be converted to cash. Derek's mind raced. His truck was worth maybe $10,000. His tools another $5,000. That's not nearly enough. Then I suggest you get creative. My client is willing to discuss alternative arrangements if you find yourself unable to pay in full. What kind of arrangements? Let's just say my client has various business interests that could benefit from someone with your particular skill set. Construction, demolition, transportation of sensitive materials. Derek wasn't stupid. He understood what was being offered, illegal work for illegal money. The kind of thing that could land him in prison, or worse. And if I refuse? The voice on the phone turned colder. Mr. Sutton, I don't think you fully appreciate your situation. Your new creditor knows where you live, knows where you work, knows about your girlfriend and her daughter. It would be unfortunate if your inability to meet your obligations resulted in complications for the people around you. Ice flooded Derek's veins. You threatening Rosa? You leave her out of this. That's entirely up to you. 30 days, Mr. Sutton. Someone will be in touch to discuss payment arrangements. The line went dead. Derek stood in his living room, phone still pressed to his ear, reality crashing down around him. He borrowed from Corelli to cover gambling debts, thinking he could win it back. Instead, he dug the hole deeper. And now, some faceless organization owned him, controlled him, could destroy him and everyone around him with a single phone call. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Lou's Cafe on Morrison Street. Come alone. Bring financial documentation. Derek's hands shook as he grabbed another beer. This was spiraling out of control. He needed money, needed it fast, and his options were narrowing to a pinpoint. His eyes landed on his laptop. Rosa had mentioned something about a small savings account she'd managed to build up for Lily's future. $5,000, maybe $6,000. Not enough to solve his problem, but enough to buy him time while he figured out the rest. He could ask. Tell her it was an emergency. Promise to pay her back. She loved him, didn't she? She'd understand. And if she didn't understand, well, Derek knew how to be persuasive. Alessandro sat in his office at midnight, studying surveillance photos that Marco had delivered an hour earlier. Derek Sutton, leaving his apartment building at 11:47 p.m., clearly agitated, getting into his truck, and driving to a bar on the south side. Derek sitting alone, drinking heavily, checking his phone repeatedly. Derek stumbling back to his truck at 1:30 a.m., barely able to walk straight. The debt purchase went through smoothly, Marco reported. Corelli was happy to unload Sutton at 90 cents on the dollar. Didn't ask questions. And the lawyer who made the call? Michael Rothstein. One of our best. Former prosecutor, completely comfortable operating in gray areas. Sutton has no idea who actually owns his debt now. Alessandro studied the photos, watching Derek's progression from angry to drunk to desperate. 30 days should be enough time. For what exactly? For Sutton to make the choices that will destroy himself. We're not going to kill him, Marco. We're going to systematically dismantle his life until he has nothing left except the options we provide. Marco raised an eyebrow. And those options are? Leave the city permanently, or accept work in our most dangerous operations, the kind where life expectancy is measured in months, not years. You're giving him a choice between exile and suicide. I'm giving him consequences for his actions. What he does with them is his decision. Marco was quiet for a moment. Boss, I've worked for you for 5 years. I've seen you eliminate rivals, negotiate impossible deals, make decisions that terrified men twice your age. But I've never seen you toy with someone like this. Never seen you invest this much personal energy in someone who's essentially nobody. Alessandro looked up from the photos. He put his hands on a woman and traumatized her child. That makes him somebody I care about removing from this world. Because of the teacher cover? Because the kids in your class? Because it's the right thing to do. The words hung in the air between them, foreign and strange. Alessandro Dante didn't make decisions based on morality. He made them based on profit, strategy, survival. The concept of right and wrong had been beaten out of him years ago by a father who believed that sentiment was weakness and compassion was for fools. Yet here he sat, orchestrating an elaborate psychological warfare campaign against a construction worker who meant nothing to his organization, all because a 5-year-old girl had drawn purple bruises in crayon. Marco cleared his throat. The meeting tomorrow at Lou's Cafe. What's the play? Send Richards. He's good at playing the professional debt collector. I want him to offer Sutton exactly two paths: immediate payment of $47,000 or enrollment in our smuggling operations running goods through the harbor. Sutton's not smart enough for smuggling. He'll get caught or killed within weeks. Exactly. Understanding dawned on Marco's face. You're engineering his removal without directly ordering it. I'm providing opportunities. What he does with them determines his fate. And the woman, Rosa Martinez, what happens to her when Sutton either disappears or dies? Alessandro was quiet for a long moment. That depends on what she needs. Boss, I have to ask. Are you developing feelings for this woman? I barely know her. That's not an answer. Alessandro stood, moving to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Rosa Martinez was probably lying awake, worrying about money, about Derek's mood, about how to keep her daughter safe while maintaining the facade that everything was fine. She didn't know that her boyfriend's debt had been purchased by the man who taught her daughter the alphabet. Didn't know that a carefully orchestrated plan was already in motion to extract her from a dangerous situation she probably didn't even realize she was in. My feelings are irrelevant, Alessandro said finally. This is about protecting an innocent child from a violent man. That's all. Marco knew better than to argue. But as he left Alessandro's office, he couldn't shake the feeling that his boss was lying, not to him, but to himself. Rosa's hands were shaking, so badly she could barely unlock the apartment door. It was 2 a.m. Derek had called an hour ago, drunk and angry, demanding she come to some bar on the south side to pick him up. His truck had a flat tire, he'd said. Or maybe he'd said he was too drunk to drive. The details blurred together with all the other late-night emergencies that had become routine over the past 6 months. Lily was asleep at Mrs. Chen's apartment across the hall. The elderly neighbor had become Rosa's lifeline. Watching Lily during these crisis moments without asking questions Rosa didn't know how to answer. Derek was waiting outside the bar, leaning heavily against the brick wall, his eyes unfocused and mean. "Took you long enough," he slurred as Rosa approached. "I came as fast as I could. Let's get you home." "Home?" Derek laughed bitterly. "That shithole apartment you pay for with your pathetic waitress money? That's not a home, Rosa. That's a prison." Rosa had learned not to engage when he was like this. She just guided him toward her car, supporting his weight, trying not to think about how much he'd changed from the charming man who'd swept her off her feet 8 months ago. Back then, he'd been attentive, generous with compliments if not money, interested in Lily's well-being. The transformation had been gradual, a raised voice here, a shove there, each incident followed by apologies and promises that slowly lost their meaning. Now Rosa couldn't remember the last time he'd said something kind. In the car, Derek stared out the window, his jaw clenched. "I need money. I gave you $200 last week. I need more. 5,000. Rosa nearly swerved into another lane. $5,000? Derek, I don't have that kind of money. My entire savings is barely... She stopped, realizing her mistake. Derek turned to look at her with predatory focus. "Your savings? The account you said was for Lily's future. How much is in there? That's not your money. That's for Lily's education, for emergencies. This is an emergency." Derek's voice turned hard. "I owe some people, Rosa. Bad people. And if I don't pay them, they're going to hurt me. Maybe hurt you. Maybe hurt Lily." Fear spiked through Rosa's chest. "What did you do?" "I made some bad bets. Borrowed from the wrong people. And now I need that money to make it right." "No." The word came out stronger than Rosa felt. "That money is for my daughter. I'm not giving it to you to cover gambling debts." Derek's hand shot out, gripping her thigh hard enough to bruise. "You think you have a choice?" Rosa's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Take your hand off me. Or what? You'll leave?" Derek laughed. "Where would you go? You can barely afford that apartment on your own. You think you can raise Lily without help? You need me, Rosa. And right now I need that money." They'd reached Derek's apartment building. Rosa pulled over, keeping the car running. "Get out." "Rosa, get out of my car, Derek. I'm not giving you Lily's college fund, so you can throw it away at a casino." Something dangerous flickered in Derek's eyes. For a moment, Rosa thought he might hit her right there, in the car, where anyone could see. But he just stared at her with cold calculation. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Those people I owe. They know where you work, know where you live, know what school Lily goes to. You really want to take that risk just to protect some money sitting in a bank account? The threat was clear, explicit. Rosa had always known Derek was capable of violence. She had the bruises to prove it. But threatening Lily crossed a line she couldn't forgive. Get out. Derek climbed out of the car, then leaned back through the open door. You've got until tomorrow to change your mind. After that, I can't protect you from what happens next. He slammed the door hard enough to make the whole car shake. Rosa drove home on autopilot, her mind spinning with fear and fury, and the dawning realization that she couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't keep pretending. Couldn't keep sacrificing her and Lily's safety for a relationship that had become toxic months ago. But leaving wasn't simple. Derek knew where she lived, where she worked, where Lily went to school. He had friends, connections, the kind of people who'd help him track her down if she tried to run. She was trapped in a situation with no clear exit, running out of options, and completely alone. Except, Rosa's mind flashed to this morning, to Mr. Dante sitting in the diner, his dark eyes seeing everything she tried to hide, to the $100 tip that still sat in her purse untouched, to his quiet words, if you or Lily ever need anything at all, my door is always open. What kind of kindergarten teacher left $100 tips? What kind of educator showed up at a diner on the wrong side of the city just to check on a student's mother? Rosa didn't know. But as she pulled into her apartment building's parking lot and saw Mrs. Chen's light still on, the elderly woman waiting up to make sure Rosa got home safe, she realized she might need to find out. Because Derek Sutton had just threatened her daughter. And whatever Mr. Dante was hiding behind his professional teacher persona, Rosa suspected it was exactly the kind of dangerous she might need right now. Alessandro's phone rang at 2:47 a.m. He was still awake, reviewing financial reports from his legitimate businesses, trying to maintain the careful balance between his two lives. The number was the school's emergency contact line, a number that should never call in the middle of the night. This is Alessandro Dante. Mr. Dante, this is Rosa Martinez. Her voice was shaky, terrified, trying to sound calm and failing. I'm sorry to call so late. I know this is your emergency number, but I didn't know who else. Mrs. Martinez, slow down. Are you and Lily safe? Yes. We're home. We're okay. But I think I need help. Real help. The kind I don't think a kindergarten teacher normally provides. Alessandro's entire body went on alert. What happened? Rosa took a shuddering breath. My boyfriend threatened Lily tonight. Not directly, but the implication was clear. And I realize I can't do this anymore. Can't keep pretending everything's fine while my daughter draws pictures of violence and learns that men who hurt women is just normal life. You're absolutely right. You shouldn't have to do this. What do you need? I don't know. Rosa's voice cracked. I don't have money for a lawyer. I can't afford to move. Derek knows where I live, where I work, where Lily goes to school. And tonight he said he owes money to dangerous people who know all the same things. I'm trapped, Mr. Dante. And I'm terrified. Alessandro made a decision. Mrs. Martinez, I'm going to help you. But I need you to trust me, and I need you to not ask certain questions about how I'm able to help. Can you do that? There was a long pause. You're not really just a kindergarten teacher, are you? I am a kindergarten teacher. I'm also other things. Dangerous things? Sometimes. But never dangerous to you or Lily. I promise you that. Another pause, longer this time. Rosa was making calculations, weighing risks, deciding whether trusting a man she barely knew was more dangerous than staying with a man she knew too well. What do you need me to do? She asked finally. Nothing tonight. You and Lily stay home, lock your doors, don't answer if Derek comes by. Tomorrow, I want you to call in sick to work. Can you do that? I can't afford to miss a shift. I'll cover whatever wages you lose. Tomorrow, you're going to meet with some people who will help you get legal protection, find safe housing, and ensure Derek can never threaten you or Lily again. Mr. Dante, I can't pay for lawyers. You're not paying for anything. Consider it part of the educational support services the school provides for families in crisis. Rosa laughed, and it sounded slightly hysterical. No school provides this kind of support. This one does. Alessandro's voice softened. Mrs. Martinez, Rosa, you did the hardest part. You asked for help. Everything else I can handle. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Why would you do all this for us? Alessandro thought about Lily's purple crayon bruises, about Rosa's trembling hands and forced smiles, about the way both of them had learned to make themselves small and invisible to avoid provoking violence. Because Lily is in my classroom, and that makes her my responsibility. And because you're her mother, which makes you my responsibility too. That's all the reason I need. It wasn't the complete truth, but it was true enough. Okay, Rosa said quietly. Okay, I'll call in sick tomorrow. But Mr. Dante, if Derek finds out I'm planning to leave him, he'll lose his mind. He's not going to just let me walk away. He won't have a choice. By the time Derek realizes what's happening, you and Lily will be somewhere he can't reach you. You sound very confident about that. I am. After they hung up, Alessandro made 3 more calls. The first to his lawyer, explaining the situation and requesting immediate assistance with restraining orders and emergency custody protection. The second to a real estate contact who specialized in secure housing for people who needed to disappear quickly. The third to Marco. I need a detail on Rosa Martinez and her daughter. Round-the-clock protection starting immediately. They don't see the guards, but the guards see everything. How long? Marco asked. Until Derek Sutton is no longer a threat. And how long will that take? Alessandro looked at his watch. Derek's meeting with Richards was in 11 hours. Not long. He hung up and stood at his window, watching the city sleep. Somewhere out there, Derek Sutton was probably passed out drunk, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. That the debt he couldn't pay had become the weapon that would destroy him. That threatening Lily Martinez had signed his own exile order. And somewhere else in that same city, Rosa Martinez was probably lying awake, terrified and hopeful in equal measure, having just placed her daughter's safety in the hands of a man she instinctively knew was dangerous but somehow trusted anyway. Alessandro had spent 20 years building walls between himself and emotional attachment, had convinced himself that caring about people made you weak, made you vulnerable, made you a target. But standing there in the darkness, he realized those walls had already crumbled. That Lily's purple crayons and Rosa's quiet courage had demolished defenses he'd thought were impenetrable. He was personally involved now, emotionally invested, vulnerable in ways that would have terrified him a month ago. And he didn't care. Derek Sutton had made the mistake of hurting people Alessandro had decided to protect. And in doing so, he'd activated something in Alessandro that was far more dangerous than simple criminal efficiency. He'd activated something that looked a lot like justice. Derek Sutton arrived at Lou's Cafe at 1:58 p.m., 2 minutes early, his stomach churning with anxiety and last night's alcohol. The cafe was nearly empty, just an elderly couple in the corner and a businessman typing on a laptop. And at a table near the back, a man in an expensive suit reading a newspaper. The man looked up as Derek approached, his expression professionally neutral. Mr. Sutton? Yeah. Please sit. Can I order you coffee? I'm not here for coffee. I'm here to figure out how to pay off a debt I can't afford. The man, Richards, though Derek didn't know his name, folded his newspaper precisely. Let's discuss your options. You owe $47,000. Do you have access to that kind of capital? No. Any assets you could liquidate. My truck and tools might get me $15,000. That's it. Richards made a note on a tablet. That leaves a shortfall of $32,000. My client is willing to forgive the remaining debt in exchange for services rendered. What kind of services? Transportation of sensitive materials through the Harbor District. 6 months of work, bi-weekly runs, following specific protocols. Completion of the contract erases your debt entirely. Derek wasn't stupid. Sensitive materials meant drugs or guns or something equally illegal. Getting caught would mean prison time. Not getting caught would mean 6 months of living in constant fear. And if I refuse? Richard's expression didn't change, but his tone cooled. Then the full debt remains due immediately. My client has various methods of collecting on overdue accounts. Some are more unpleasant than others. You're threatening me. I'm explaining consequences. You borrowed money you couldn't repay. Those choices have created your current situation. Derek's mind raced. He could run, leave the city, start over somewhere else. But with what money? His credit was destroyed, his savings non-existent. And these people, whoever they were, seemed like the type who'd find him regardless of where he went. I need time to think. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, my client begins more aggressive collection methods. Richard stood, leaving a business card on the table. Think carefully, Mr. Sutton. This is the best offer you're going to receive. After Richards left, Derek sat alone in the cafe, staring at the business card. A phone number, nothing else. No name, no company, no indication of who was actually pulling the strings. His phone buzzed. A text from Rosa, we need to talk. I'm staying with a friend tonight. Don't come looking for me. Rage flooded through Derek's system. She was leaving him. After everything he'd done for her, all the ways he'd taken care of her and her brat daughter, she was just going to walk away? He called her number. It went straight to voicemail. He called again. Same result. Derek's hands shook with fury and fear. Rosa had his $5,000 or access to it. If she disappeared, that option disappeared too. And he needed that money, needed some way to negotiate with these people who'd bought his debt and now controlled his life. He drove to Rosa's apartment, pounding on the door until the elderly neighbor, that nosy Chinese woman who was always watching, poked her head out. Rosa's not here, Mrs. Chin said firmly. And she told me to call police if you showed up. So unless you want trouble, I suggest you leave. This is between me and Rosa. Tell me where she is. No. Mrs. Chen's voice was surprisingly strong for such a small woman. You hurt that girl. Hurt her daughter. You're not good man. You leave now. Derek wanted to push past her, search the apartment, find some clue about where Rosa had gone. But the old woman had her phone out, finger hovering over the screen, ready to call for help. He left, his mind spinning with rage and desperation. At 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before Richard's deadline, Derek made his decision. He called the number on the business card. I'll do it. The transportation job. 6 months, then we're even. Richard's voice was professionally pleased. Excellent decision, Mr. Sutton. Someone will contact you tomorrow with details about your first assignment. And Mr. Sutton, my client appreciates cooperation. Continue to cooperate, and this arrangement will proceed smoothly. Derek hung up, feeling like he'd just signed his soul away to the devil. He had no idea he'd actually signed his own exit paperwork from the city, from Rosa's life, and eventually from existence itself. Because the harbor smuggling operation Derek had just agreed to join was the most dangerous, most closely monitored, and most likely to result in arrest or death of all Alessandro Dante's various business ventures. Derek Sutton had 6 months left, maybe less if he was unlucky. And Alessandro had no intention of letting him be lucky. Rosa sat in a coffee shop 3 miles from her apartment, Lily coloring quietly beside her, while a woman named Jennifer Chong explained how restraining orders worked. The process typically takes a few days, Jennifer said, her voice professional but kind. But given the documented threats and the danger to a minor child, we can expedite emergency protection. You'll need to document every interaction, every threat, every instance of violence. Rosa's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone, showing Jennifer the text from Derek over the past 6 months. The demands for money, the accusations, the threats barely disguised as concern. This is good evidence, Jennifer said. Combined with your testimony and any witnesses. There are no witnesses. Derek was always careful. Made sure we were alone when things got physical. Physical abuse leaves evidence, even without witnesses. Have you seen a doctor recently? Rosa shook her head. I couldn't afford it. And I was afraid if I reported the bruises, they'd take Lily away from me. Jennifer's expression softened. Rosa, I want you to understand something. You're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong. The system is designed to help victims, not punish them. The system put me on a waiting list for affordable housing that's 2 years long. The system told me I made too much money to qualify for assistance, but not enough to actually afford rent and childcare. The system has never helped me before. I understand your skepticism, but Mr. Dante has made certain arrangements. Who is he? Rosa interrupted. Mr. Dante, I mean. Who is he really? Because kindergarten teachers don't have lawyers on speed dial who can get emergency meetings on a Sunday afternoon. Jennifer chose her words carefully. Mr. Dante is a businessman with various interests in the community. He's also someone who takes the welfare of his students very seriously. Beyond that, I'm not at liberty to discuss his personal affairs. Is he dangerous? Not to you or your daughter. It was the same thing Alessandro had said. The same careful non-answer that confirmed everything while explaining nothing. Lily looked up from her coloring. Is the angry man going to find us here? Rosa's heart broke. No, sweetheart. We're safe. Mr. Dante promised we'd be safe. He promised. Lily said it with the absolute faith children had in adults who show them genuine kindness. Jennifer's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then stood. I need to take this call. I'll be right back. As Jennifer stepped outside, Rosa looked around the coffee shop, at the normal people having normal conversations, living normal lives where violent boyfriends and corrupt systems and kindergarten teachers with mysterious connections weren't part of the daily equation. She'd made a choice last night when she called Alessandro Dante. A choice to trust someone she barely knew with her daughter's safety and her own future. It went against every survival instinct she developed over 28 hard years. But those same instincts told her that Alessandro, whatever he was hiding, wasn't the real danger in her life. Derek was, and whatever Alessandro was doing to protect them, Rosa suspected it involved methods that lawyers like Jennifer couldn't discuss and teachers weren't supposed to possess. Jennifer returned, her expression carefully neutral. Good news. The emergency restraining order has been approved. Derek Sutton is legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you or Lily, from contacting you in any way, and from approaching your workplace or Lily's school. That was fast. Mr. Dante has connections with certain judges who take child welfare seriously. And what happens if Derek violates the order? He'll be arrested immediately. Jennifer paused. But Rosa, I don't think you'll need to worry about that. Why not? Because I've been informed that Derek Sutton has accepted employment that will require him to relocate. The details are confidential, but apparently he'll be leaving the city within the week. Rosa stared at Jennifer, processing this information. He's leaving? Just like that? Sometimes people make choices that change their circumstances very quickly. It was another non-answer. Another carefully constructed statement that suggested more than it revealed. Rosa understood suddenly what was happening. Alessandro hadn't just offered her legal protection and safe housing. He'd somehow arranged for Derek to disappear from her life entirely. She should have been disturbed by this. Should have asked more questions about methods and legality and the kind of power required to make a violent man simply vanish on command. But all Rosa felt was overwhelming relief. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we get you and Lily settled into temporary housing while we work on permanent solutions. Mr. Dante has arranged for a furnished apartment in a secure building. 6 months rent paid in advance, utilities included. It gives you time to rebuild, to find your footing, to plan your next steps without the immediate pressure of survival. Lily tugged on Rosa's sleeve. Mama, does this mean we get a new house? Rosa looked down at her daughter, this small, resilient child who'd spent 5 years learning that safety was temporary and kindness was rare. Yes, sweetheart. We're getting a new house. A safe one. Lily smiled, the first genuine smile Rosa had seen in months. Can I have my own room? I think that can be arranged. As Jennifer gathered paperwork and explained next steps, Rosa felt something inside her chest begin to unknot. The constant anxiety that had become her baseline state started to ease, just slightly, just enough to let her take a full breath for the first time in months. She didn't know how to thank Alessandro Dante, didn't know how to repay kindness that came without obvious price tags or expected returns, didn't know how to process the reality that a man she'd met less than a month ago had fundamentally altered the trajectory of her and Lily's lives. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever darkness existed in Alessandro's world, whatever dangerous things he did when he wasn't teaching kindergarten, he'd use that power to save them. And Rosa Martinez would spend the rest of her life trying to understand why. 3 months later, Alessandro stood at his classroom window watching Lily play during recess. She was different now. Lighter. The careful tension that had defined her movements had dissolved into something closer to actual childhood. She laughed with other kids, ran without looking over her shoulder, drew pictures of rainbows and unicorns instead of purple bruises. Derek Sutton had left the city 6 days after accepting the harbor job. Not because he completed it. He'd been arrested on his second run, caught with enough contraband to guarantee a decade in federal prison. Alessandro had made certain the evidence was irrefutable and that Derek's public defender was competent. Enough to negotiate a plea deal that kept him away for a very long time. Rosa didn't know the details. She only knew that Derek was gone, that the restraining order held, and that she and Lily were finally genuinely safe. "Mr. Dante?" Rosa's voice came from the doorway. Alessandro turned, momentarily caught off guard. She rarely came to the classroom outside pickup times, and never during school hours. "Mrs. Martinez, is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually." She stepped inside, holding a covered dish. "I wanted to bring you something. To say thank you." "That's not necessary." "It absolutely is necessary." Rosa set the dish on his desk. "You changed our lives. You saved us. And I know you won't tell me how or why or what any of it cost you, but I need you to know that Lily and I are grateful every single day." Alessandro studied her face. 3 months of safety had transformed her too. The exhaustion had faded from around her eyes. Her shoulders no longer carried the defensive hunch of someone expecting violence. She looked younger, softer, like someone remembering what peace felt like. "How is the new apartment?" he asked. "Perfect. Lily has her own room with windows that get morning sun. The building has a playground. The neighbors are kind." Rosa paused. "I got promoted at the diner. Assistant manager position. Better hours, better pay. I'm even taking a night class at the community college." "That's wonderful. What are you studying?" "Early childhood education." A small smile played at her lips. "Someone recently reminded me that teachers make a real difference in children's lives. I thought maybe I could do that too." Something warm and unexpected bloomed in Alessandro's chest. "You'll be excellent at it." They stood in comfortable silence, the sounds of children playing filtering through the window. Alessandro knew he should maintain professional distance, should keep the careful walls between his worlds intact. But Rosa was looking at him with something in her eyes that made those walls seem less important. "Mr. Dante, Alessandro, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you really help us? And please don't say it's because Lily's your student. I know there's more to it than that." Alessandro considered lying, considered maintaining the careful fiction that he was simply a dedicated teacher who'd gone above and beyond for a family in need. But Rosa deserved truth, at least some version of it, because Lily reminded me that children deserve to feel safe, and because you reminded me that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about asking for help even when every instinct tells you not to trust anyone. That's not a complete answer. It's the most complete answer I can give right now. Rosa stepped closer, close enough that Alessandro could smell her perfume, something simple and clean that reminded him of spring mornings. "The lawyer you sent, Jennifer, she let something slip once. She said you were a businessman with various community interests. What kind of business?" "The kind that operates in complicated spaces. Dangerous spaces? Sometimes. But not dangerous to us. Never to you." Rosa reached out, her hand hovering near his arm but not quite touching. "I don't need to know everything. I don't need details or explanations. I just need to know one thing." "What's that?" "Are you a good man, Alessandro Dante? Despite the complicated spaces and the dangerous things, are you fundamentally good?" It was the question Alessandro had stopped asking himself years ago. The question his father had taught him was irrelevant in a world where survival mattered more than morality. But standing in his kindergarten classroom, surrounded by alphabet posters and children's artwork, looking at a woman who'd been broken by violence and was choosing to trust him anyway, Alessandro found an answer he didn't know he still possessed. "I'm trying to be." Rosa smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "That's good enough for me." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Lily wants to invite you to her birthday party next month. It's just going to be a few kids from class, pizza and cake at the apartment. Nothing fancy. But she insisted I ask you." Alessandro felt something crack in his chest, the final remnants of walls he'd spent 20 years building. I'd be honored. After Rosa left, Alessandro returned to the window. Lily was on the swings now, pumping her legs, her laughter carrying across the playground. A little girl who'd drawn purple bruises 3 months ago was now drawing sunshine. His phone buzzed. Marco with updates about territory disputes and profit margins, and the 100 other details that comprised his real life. But for the first time in 20 years, those details felt less important than a 5-year-old's birthday party invitation and a woman's simple question about fundamental goodness. Alessandro Dante was still a criminal, still dangerous, still operated in spaces where morality was negotiable and violence was currency. But he was also a kindergarten teacher who'd saved a child from trauma and her mother from abuse. And maybe that was enough. Maybe redemption wasn't about erasing the darkness, but about choosing light whenever possible. Maybe he was becoming the man Lily believed he already was. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love the story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.